Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today we are thinking about becoming visible. That is a thinker. And luckily, we are going to be thinking about this today with Gayle. So thank you so much, Gayle, for coming on to my show, sharing your time and your perspective with me. I'm excited. So let's just dive right in. When you hear those words, becoming visible, what does that make you think about?
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for having me as your guest. I really appreciate it. For me, becoming visible means just that, intentionally being visible, being yourself, being in front of people, talking about your story, being vulnerable, all of that.
Yeah, I love that because people don't realize like your story, what you've gone through is your testimony. It has built you up, you know what I mean? Like it has made you become the person that you were, oh, you didn't even know you were meant to be, you know what I mean? It's truly a tricky thing with life is that we one moment our offenses can be a wisdom in another moment of our lives, you know? So like for you, when did you realize that this understanding was important for you to become visible and to embrace it?
Yeah, it's very new for me, frankly. So, a little bit about my background. So, I was a healthcare leader for 30 plus years, starting out as secretary and moving all the way up as I got through my education and got my master's degree. All during that time, no one knew that I was a burn survivor. And I struggled all through my career with imposter syndrome. And just around the time of COVID, I retired, started my own coaching and image consulting business, and launched with a fashion show. And the first one was 2018, the second one was 2019, and it was much bigger. It was like four times the size. And I had about 200 people in my audience. And it was a fundraiser for Beads of Courage, which is an international organization that supports especially kids with cancer. And so I had met the founder through a mutual friend who sat on our board. And after meeting, we decided it would be a great way to collaborate. And so, long story short, as I was backstage with her the second year, having now known her about 3 years, we were chatting. And I always tease her because she travels internationally that I live vicariously through her. And I said, "So, Jean, where have you been?" And she said, "I just spent the last 3 days with burn survivor kids at Phoenix Children's Hospital." I opened my mouth, tears poured, and nothing else came out. And at that very same moment, I was called to the podium. And I went out with my typical, I had my speech all written, went out there, and I looked at the audience, and very few of them did I actually know because people had brought friends. But the only one who knew my real story, whole story, or so he thought at the time, was my husband. And I stood there with the tears running and a mascara running. And I said, "I'm so sorry, but Jean just told me she had been with burn kids in Phoenix. And I wish my family and I had had that kind of support when I was burned as a toddler." There was all kinds of food. It was like a luncheon with tea and all of that. And you could literally hear a pin drop. At the time, I didn't know to like lean into that silence. And I just went right on. That's when I learned I needed to be visible. I wanted to be visible. I wrote my first book. My second book, which is a full memoir, just came out in April of this year. And over the course of about the last 4 years, I have been visible. I'm speaking to people, I'm speaking to groups, I'm luncheon speaker, keynote speaker, breakout speaker, podcast guest speaker, all those amazing things. And had you told me really even 4 years or so ago that I'd be doing that, I would have told you were crazy.
Well, absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of your story is that you never realized that it was needed until you realize like there are still this is still happening. You know what I mean? Kids are still getting burned, still kids are still being abused in a way that they never even could even fathom or imagine. They never even knew anything else in this world until they decide to you know what I mean, view life differently, move out of that environment, you know what I mean, separate themselves. And it's hard, you know, as a child, you have no voice, you know what I mean, or they feel voiceless because you're supposed to you're supposed to appear, but not say anything, you know what I mean? You're supposed to be present and you're just supposed to be cute and, you know, quiet and lovely and kind. And it's frustrating because it's like, I'm still human, you know what I mean? I'm still human. And one day I am going to have a longer adult life than I am going to have a child, you know, as a child's life. And it's like, it's beautiful that you were able to just share your story with other people, letting them know that this is real, this has happened to me, but I am still human. I'm still alive. I am still aware. And I'm here to advocate for the ones that can't advocate for themselves. And I think that's the beauty of being visible is that you may not have a tragic story like Gayle's, you know, being burnt, but at least you were alive and you still have the opportunity to share your story. And what made you decide to like go into the route of actually writing your story? Because you could have just kept it at the point of just sharing with other people or just sharing in those moments, but what made it real for you to actually put it in a book?
So before I started sharing my story, the book was born. And I think, well, let me backtrack for a sec. So at that fashion show, there was a woman in the audience who is very well known here in Tucson, where I live. And she came up to me after the event and she gave me a big hug and she said, "We don't know each other, but I was very moved by what you said. And clearly you have a deeper, bigger story. I want to hear it." And I looked at her like she was nuts and I said, "I don't have a story, but I'm happy to hear yours." And so she said, "Let's go have coffee." Well, we wound up having many wines and lots of coffee. That was September 12th of 2019. And by Christmas, maybe early January, she had gotten my story out of me. And she said, "My daughter and I wrote a book because her daughter was born with a blood cancer and survived off of blood transfusions." And she said, "So we wrote a book for kids about getting stuck, needles stuck." And she's like, "Your story's so similar, but so different. You need to write a book." And I said, "Don't know how to do that, but thank you for the advice and the opinion." And I went back home and I noodled on it for a few days. My husband's a journalist, been a journalist his whole career. And I walked into his office one day and I said, "So how do you write a book?" And he looked at me kind of oddly and he said, "Just sit at the computer and just type. Don't think about chapters, titles, um, topics, just type." And I did. And then COVID hit and my business was not doing anything. And I picked up the computer and moved it into the living room and just kept on typing. And several months in, I printed out my manuscript and I brought it into my husband's office and I said, "Will you read this?" And he's like, "What's that?" I said, "That I think is my book." And he read it and he said, "I know I'm very close to this, but you're right. This is a book." And so I sent it back to the woman who encouraged me initially. And Kathy is her name. And she's like, "Gayle, this is amazing." So I reached out, and people who write books know that there's a catch 22 with writing. You can't get a publisher if you don't have an agent, and you can't get an agent if you don't have a publisher. So I tried to get an agent, I tried to get a publisher, and I was getting a lot of no thank yous. And I reached out to this one woman who owns a small publishing company, and she read my synopsis. And within 15 minutes, I got an email back, and she said, "My son was injured as a toddler. I have to publish your book." So that's how that
Mm,
started. And when the book came out, I thought, well, how do I get people to read this book? I have to
yeah.
talk about it. And so that's how sharing my story actually came about. So it was really putting the cart before the horse rather than the other way around. And then
Yeah.
that book is really written more for young people. And as I spoke and told more stories that weren't in that book, as I got more comfortable with myself and my stories and my body, I decided after hearing from people in my audience that it needed to be more in-depth book for adults. I sat down and wrote my memoir.
Such a beautiful thing because you're absolutely right. People don't realize that they're looking for a survivor. You know what I mean? They're looking for somebody who has survived something that was meant to knock them down, to beat them to death, to lay them to rest. You know what I mean? Because they feel that life is unbearable. They feel that life is a torment. They feel like it's unworthy and it's unnecessary. But then when you read somebody else's story of survival and how they kept pursuing life, it makes you realize like I can keep going. You know what I mean? It becomes like a motivator. You know what I mean? Like if Gail could do it, who's to say that I can't do it? You know what I mean? If Gail was able to pursue forward and she was disfigured and she was unbearable, you know what I mean? Then it's like, okay, I can continue to go forward despite my disgrace, despite my whatever that people want to call it, because at the end of the day, it's a part of me, you know what I mean? And it comes down to learning to love all of you, you know what I mean? So it's like my question is, what motivates you today?
What motivates me more than anything is when I'm in a group with whether it's 3 people or 300 people, when people, after I speak and share my story and share my vulnerability, inevitably one or more people will either raise their hand and say, I was burned, I was traumatized, I was whatever. Um, and they'll either sometimes do it in a group if they're comfortable, but more than likely and more often than not, they come up to me while I'm either putting my um, retractable banner away or something, and they'll say, so, can I just tell you? This one gentleman said to me, I was in the military and I was burned and my leg is severely scarred. I never wear short pants. Only my wife has ever seen my scars. And he rolled up his pants and he showed me his leg. And I said, why did you choose now to tell me? He said, because you're helping me free myself. And the two of us just sat there and cried. It was
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
I motivated him, I inspired him to be his full self, his authentic self, and share. And then he turned to the group and he said, I just told Gail I was burned. No one knew that about me before. And people in this room had known him a very long time. He was in Rotary and they meet every week, and there were tears all around the room. So it's that what motivates me to keep sharing my story. We all have a story. We've all been burned physically, emotionally. Divorce is trauma, burn is trauma. Child abuse, you referred to that earlier, that's trauma. We all deal with some sort of it and we hide it. We're embarrassed, we're ashamed by it, we're guilty. And when we're able to share our stories, we're able to unburden that and take that weight off our shoulders. And that to me is what freed me and enables me to keep going. And if I can help other people do that, that's why I believe I survived. I didn't know that anywhere along the line until very recently, but that's why I am here.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that because I don't think people realize like when you're in the storm, you don't realize that you're in the storm, or you don't see the light on the other side. But it's like we have to like really see storms like water buffaloes. One things that people don't realize about water buffaloes is that they don't actually like water, you know what I mean? So they'll
Yes.
smell the storm coming, and instead of staying there standing in the storm, they will run towards the storm because they know if they run towards it, the amount of times that they're going to get wet is less than if they were to stay still. And so that by the time they're done, the storm has passed them and they pass the storm, they're already in a dry green like clear sky pastures, and they realize, oh, I'm okay and everything's fine. And I feel like that's one of my motivators, and I always tell myself I'm gonna be like a water buffalo. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna be like anytime I'm going through something that's uncomfortable or it gives me just a stress and just oh this anxiety that's like I don't know if I can make it through. I'm like, you know what? I could be like a water buffalo, and I will go through and I will make it through because I know that there's light on the other side. There's a purpose to this pain. There's a purpose to this season. There's gonna be purpose. I may not know it right now, but later when I give my time the grace to look back, I know that I will be okay. And I know that this is only going to make me stronger. And I can only just pray that I learn the lesson in this season so that I don't have to repeat this lesson over and over and over again. And I think that is something that I hold on to and that has helped me through all of my hardship in my life, because it's like you can either go in that direction or you can go in the opposite direction and stand there and feel the storm and feel victimized and feel sad and feel burdened and then throw yourself a pity party, but realizing like that pity party doesn't get you anywhere. It literally like sinks you in, and then you develop you don't even realize you're digging yourself in a hole instead of running out and becoming something greater and better. You know what I mean? And I think that is the beauty of you sharing your story, is that you're helping inspire people like, no, we're water buffaloes. We're gonna keep on going. We're gonna move forward. You know what I mean? We're gonna do something with this and we're gonna make it beautiful. You know what I mean? It's like that one lullaby about making a cake and marking it and then
Yes.
giving it out. You know what I mean? It's like that. Like that's what we're doing. We're taking all of the ingredients that's pain and love and beauty and hurt and all of it together and we da da da, that's the beauty of a cake. And it's like I wish more people thought of their life in that manner, because it truly becomes something so different. And it sucks to know that time is catching up to a scale, because I feel like we could keep talking about this and go down this rabbit hole in a whole new direction. But what can be some lasting words that you can leave us off with to keep on thinking?
Well, I think a couple things come to thought. First of all, I think it's really important to recognize that we are not alone.
Yeah.
Regardless of what we are facing, trauma, a bad day, whatever it is, we tend to be in our bubble and in ourselves and think, no one's been through this before. This is the worst experience ever. And
Yeah.
that's not true. And there are other people going through similar things at the very same time, may not be identical, but they're painful in whatever way that pain is affecting us. And so I think it's very important, again, to remember that we are not alone. And when we share our stories, we are then credible, and we hear back from other people that we're not alone, that they too have experienced what we're talking about. And so then we feel, what's the word I want? Um, Listened to, authenticated, right? And so that's really important. The other thing I want to just add to is when we go from victim to survivor, that's when we've moved the needle. That's when we're ready to admit to ourselves and to others what we've been through and that we've been able to overcome it. And that when we do that, when we're in the process of moving from victim to survivor, many times we can't do that alone. We need help. And it doesn't have to be mental health professionals. That's helpful, but there's still a stigma to that, unfortunately. That's another whole conversation. However, we don't necessarily need to do it alone. And so if we just talk to one other person, a good friend, a significant other, a, a religious person, a pastor, a rabbi, or whoever that is, that's how we move that needle. Because until we take it outside of ourselves, I don't think we're able to be whole and to totally move that needle. And what I'd love to leave your visitors with is this. We're in a really difficult climate right now, and that's not to be a political statement at all. It's a tough time for everyone. And so, because we don't know what you're going through when we see you, whether you're the cashier at the grocery store or the retail salesperson or someone we pass in the hall at work, and if we smile, I've learned this smile is so contagious and
It
it
is.
can change someone's life, change someone's day. And what I coach my clients on is, especially when you're interviewing, because we get nervous when we do that, if we smile and we're even on the phone, a smile is something that transfers across the phone lines. People on the other side can see it, hear it, feel it. And that's so important.
Absolutely. I agree. I loved everything that you said. I just want to go back just to touch on it with when you said sharing. Oh my goodness, yes. We need to share our stories. You need to find the right person. And if you happen to come across the wrong people, don't let that bring you down. Don't let that burden you. Don't let that turn you away from even ever sharing your story again. Just know that that's just one bad apple. Don't ruin your life for one bad apple in the bunch. Just know that that's just not your person. That's just not your audience. That's just not what the direction that you need to go. But just know that there's always somebody out there who's willing to hear, despite somebody that said that's not worth it. That's devaluing. Don't allow somebody else's self projections of their own intimidations, of their own fears to be laid on you and for you to think, oh, this is what I need to do now because so and so said it wasn't good enough. So I must not be good enough. My story must not be good enough. Like, no, 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 you go forward, you move forward, and you keep trying until you find the right person. And like I said, like somebody told me before, a no is a gift. So take that no, take that rejection, and take that as a gift, knowing that that's one less person you got to worry about. There's trillions of people on this earth. I literally mean trillions to billions to trillions to millions and whatever infinity on. There's so many people on this earth, and we're going to get stuck on one person, two people, three people, five people who say no or who are against you. Don't let that be against you because you're going to find your community. You're going to find people who value your story. You're going to find people who realize, like, wow, that's relatable. Wow, I finally feel seen. Like you said, you realize that you're whole. You need that community to lift you up. So I value that 100%. And like you said, invite people into your life, invite people into your community, to what you're trying to do, because we are not meant to live this life alone. And I know it is so easy to get in that isolation mindset because we live in a very independent culture movement that's like, oh, I can be independent. I don't need anybody. I can cut people off as soon as I see them or as soon as I don't like something. But you got to remember, we are not meant to live this life alone because as you go to the grocery store to get food, you still need somebody to pick the food. You still need somebody to stock the food. You still need somebody to pay you out. You don't need this. You still need somebody in this world because if you were really self-sufficient, go fly to a planet and live there all by yourself if you're so sufficient. You know what I mean? And then yes, to talk about smiling. Oh my goodness, how I value that and how I always held on to that because man, just a smile has saved me, has saved the other person. Like you don't know what somebody else is going through. Even a compliment. Like I'm a type of person that I will compliment somebody. I don't care if it's female, male, a dog. I literally was driving and I will scream out at a girl and be like, I love your outfit or I love your dog or you're working. You know what I mean? Just to see a smile on their face just because it's like something so simple as like a compliment can just lighten somebody's day in such a way that it brings them hope for humanity. And let's be honest, people need to know that there is actually hope for humanity. And that's what makes us human. Oh my goodness, human beings are amazing, but they're not amazing if you allow them to live in a mindset that was never really meant to be for you. So please, oh my goodness, how I enjoy this conversation with you, Gail, so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this conversation too, because how could you not? Right? How could you not? So, please go check out Gail. I have her website in the description. If you're listening on audio or if you're on YouTube, you'll find the description there. Or if you're on my website, go find her lovely photo, click on it, and boom, it goes straight to her website. So, you can find all the great content. So, you can find her books so that you can obviously continue on thinking. So, with that being said, bye.